Hi everyone. It's a huge blessing and real honour to welcome Paris Williams to the Emerging Proud campaign. Hi Paris. And you are most well known for your really infamous book now, Rethinking Magnus, and you're a clinical psychologist over in New Zealand. We were just saying there's a slight time delay on the recording because we're kind of at opposite sides of the world, so apologies folks if there's some sound interference going on. But yeah, it's a real blessing to have you here as part of the campaign, and Paris, I really appreciate you joining. I know you emerged Proud some years ago, but it's really lovely to have some people I truly respect and have really helped me along my integration journey to join the campaign. So really appreciate you being here and sharing some of your story with the community.
Pleasure to be here, Katie. Thanks for having me.
So I was just wondering if we could start by, I don't know much about your personal story other than you were a pilot, hang glider, and you had your break experience and thankfully avoided admission into the psychiatric system. And I was just wondering if you'd mind talking a bit about whether there was a specific trigger for you or what kind of led to that, and maybe like what you feel helped with managing that process and not kind of ending up within the psychiatric system like a lot of people do. If you would just mind sharing a bit of your personal story.
Yeah, of course. The challenge is putting it into a nice, concise nutshell. There's a lot to it, but essentially, I emerged from my childhood. I had quite a painful childhood. Just a lot of things happened that were really difficult, and I wasn't able to really integrate properly and really make peace with for many years. And into my 20s, my late adolescence, I discovered hang gliding. And hang gliding was a sort of wonderful gift because it let me just sort of keep everything on the ground and just go up into the sky and fly and be really happy as long as I was up there. So I spent as much time as possible in the sky, basically.
Wow.
And at the same time, also, I became a real seeker because I knew that, like, deep down, it's like I felt like my heart had broken from a very young age, and I didn't know how to repair it. So I was traveling around the world and exploring lots of different sort of spiritual and philosophical approaches and flying as much as possible. And by the time I hit about 29, I had I basically is when the carpet got ripped out from under my feet. And pretty much one fell swoop, it felt like, but in hindsight, it was clear that I was kind of leading up to this moment where this was going to happen. And essentially, I sort of just reached the pinnacle of my career. I just won the U.S. national championships, and I went to Australia and won the Australian championships. So I kind of won two of the most difficult competitions in the world that year. Wow. I was really excited. I was being offered all these sponsorships. Just basically had the perfect dream career. I could just fly around, travel around the world, fully paid, flying hang gliders. And so I thought I was going to be really happy. I thought I had it all figured out. This is it. I finally made it to the top. And 2 weeks after winning the Australian championships, I just fell into the most dark despair I could ever imagine. And I realized that essentially that I couldn't find the happiness I was looking for by external achievements or something inside that I had to really make peace with. So this was kind of the first, I guess, domino that fell. And then over the next few weeks, I just had like epiphany after epiphany, just really powerful epiphanies. Just world view shattering epiphanies, essentially. And after I came back to the U.S. a few weeks later, I go over a lot of this in this guidebook I put together that you can find on my website, rethinkingmagnus.com. But essentially, a few weeks later, literally in just one moment, so I was in this very kind of unstable state, trying to make sense of the world. Really just, I had epiphanies of feeling deep interconnectedness with the world, with other people, but at the same time feeling a deep sense of suffering, just really feeling it within my own being, and also an awareness of it in others that I hadn't really had noticed before, just the kind of existential turmoil and suffering that I think we all have to work through.
Yeah.
And it was just hitting me, and I was just in a real kind of shocked state. And then suddenly, literally within about a moment, it felt like essentially my whole construct of the world just kind of disintegrated, and I was just having this raw experience of existence, just like all, being bombarded by senses and light waves and sound waves, and not but being seen beyond the constructs of all of that, just kind of having a very raw experience of the world. And it was at once extremely amazing and wonderful, and also absolutely terrifying, kind of all together, all wrapped up. And I thought, so this went on for a few hours. I wasn't telling the friends that I was hanging out with because I didn't want them to panic. And I had actually taken LSD a number of years earlier, and I thought, okay, maybe I'm having a flashback, and it'll pass. And so I kind of had this observing ego, you might say. I was sort of aware that I was having this amazingly powerful experience, altered state, extreme state experience. I hadn't taken any drugs, but it was happening, and I was trying not to panic and just kind of, maybe this will pass. And by late that night, it hadn't passed. And so I was living in a community. I just went to the cabinet to see if someone had some liquor. I wasn't really drinking at the time, but just like, I gotta sleep, and hopefully I'll wake up and it'll be gone, and drink some liquor and fell asleep. And then I woke up the next day, and not only was I still in that same altered state of mind, but now I was hungover on top of it. So I was like, okay, I have to make peace with this. So anyway, I slowly evolved from what felt like essentially a psychedelic trip in a way, because I was having this very expansive, unitive experience. And it turned into a very bad trip because it wasn't going away. And I hadn't taken any drug. Usually you can sort of, if you take a drug, you think, okay, the drug's going to stop. And it wasn't stopping. So then I started kind of panicking. And I had learned mindfulness meditation about a year and a half prior to this, although I hadn't been practicing much. So I knew that was what I was going to have to turn to, because I didn't know what else to do. It was either that or go into the mental health system. And I had already known enough about the system that I didn't want to get forced to be put on drugs and all of that.
Yeah.
So I ended up meditating like my hair was on fire, basically. I just became extremely diligent. I had to make peace with these deeper truths that began to unfold in my work, essentially really, really seeing the interconnected and permanent nature of the world. Yes. And how the sense of ground and solidity and stability that I had taken for granted was actually really kind of an illusion, and I had to actually make peace with a much more deeper truth of the world as being far less kind of grounded and far more impermanent and unstable. And so I turned to my body. So actually, I was fortunate that I was able to resource myself because I had some really good resources. So I didn't have to go to the system. I didn't have to go on drugs. But nonetheless, it was still extremely terrifying for much of it. Yeah. I was having panic attacks. I was having extremely wild belief systems within my mind that sometimes I mostly managed to keep an observing sort of witness to all of that. But sometimes I would get a bit lost in them. But mostly a mindfulness practice helped me maintain a observing kind of presence for all of that. And bit by bit, I made peace with it, worked through it, and kind of came through the other side, recognizing that I'd actually gone through this profound healing process. And it was interesting because part of me the whole time, if I went online and went through Google, etc., I'd be like, okay, you have this brain disease, probably called schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder or something like that. And I just was like, you know what, I can't even go there, because to think that there's something broken about my brain is just, I'm so fragile right now, it's just going to tip me, that's going to create a self-fulfilling process.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So I had to trust that there was a deep healing process, because I could feel that all this early turmoil and trauma was kind of emerging and flooding me, along with like much more sort of transpersonal experiences. Yeah. And I could feel that my being was trying to heal that. I could feel that happening inside of me. And so I just said, okay, I need to trust this process and just work through it. And bit by bit that happened. And I was really fortunate that I stayed away from the system, stayed away from drugs. Found a few, I really resonated with the Buddhist tradition at the time. So actually, I went to some teachers at times and shared little bits of what was going on, not the whole thing, because I didn't want to freak them out, but enough to get some guidance anyway. And that really helped a lot. And then the other thing was essentially resourcing by going to my body. So just spending lots of time doing sensation-based mindfulness practice, yoga, running, just because my mind was so chaotic that I had, my only refuge was in my body, essentially. So that helped me kind of work through it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was going to ask you about which resources you found the most helpful. It's so fascinating. It's like so much of what you said really, really resonates with me, and it's hearing stories like yours that helped me to kind of, you know, really believe in the other framework of emerging and not mental illness, because I did exactly the same thing. But I love the analogy you gave about the split between, you know, that as your unresolved trauma, human self, and your flying kind of spirit, you used to escape by flying, and the how kind of separate that was. And I suppose where the split occurred, and then having to really face the truth of that split within yourself, it sounded like, to bring those two to kind of integration. And what helped you do that? It's fascinating analogy, because I know it's so common, isn't it? The pattern, everybody's experience is obviously individual, but the pattern of what you explained was it's emerging with pretty much everybody I talk to. It's the same kind of pattern, you know, it's existential questioning. I've achieved as much as I can achieve, and it's not bringing me happiness. So what's this about? This existential questioning that happens. So yeah, thank you. I think hearing stories like yours, you know, and it's like you just shared there, sharing your story is healing in itself. So you practice meditation and you were able to hold that was one thing that I really noticed. It's the difference between somebody that maybe isn't able to manage the process and has to go into the system, as opposed to somebody like you who is able to just hold on to not having to go and seek crisis help, is having that witness stance, kind of that witnesses to your own emotions. And I know you work as a clinical psychologist now, and it says on your website about, you know, your approach is humanistic, transpersonal and somatic, which is wonderful, like really acknowledging the body part, which is often missed, isn't it? Just wondering,
yeah, absolutely,
what you use to help people with that. Do you have particular practices or methodologies that you use with people to help with that?
I do, yeah. So the specific methodologies, there's quite a few, but one in particular is called Hakomi, Hakomi. It's a Native American word that means how do you stand in relation to these many realms. It's quite a lovely approach, because it's all mindfulness based, and it's not just about the body. It's called somatic, meaning body, but it's actually somatic in the sense that it incorporates awareness of physical sensations, bodily experiences, posture, impulses. So it's a whole organism approach. So essentially, you're just supporting the person and being very present with their entire organism, not just what's going on with the mind or the beliefs, etc., but also what's going on in the body, because often the body is the gateway to the unconscious mind. Someone might be talking up here on an intellectual level, but their posture or impulse or sensations are saying something quite different. If you help a person get curious to that, A, it gives them more information about what might be going on at a deeper level, and B, it gives you something tangible to work with. So if you have some really overwhelming emotion, what is that? What does it mean to have overwhelming terror or rage? Where do you find that? And if you go, oh, right, in my body right now, I feel this intense pressure in my chest, or my throat's closing up, or I feel my fists getting ready, then that actually gives you something tangible to work with the emotion, so that it becomes much more workable that way, much more manageable. So kind of in a nutshell, that's the idea, is bringing that mindfulness, the key to mindfulness being both awareness, self-awareness, and also acceptance. So you're developing a non-reactive attitude towards my present experience. So it may be very unpleasant, but hey, this is what's here in this moment. So can I actually bring an open curiosity to it, and make some kind of peace with it, and listen, what's the message underneath this? Is this powerful emotion moving through me? What's it saying about my life, my values, my needs?
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it? And something that you cover a lot in your book, Rethinking Magnus, is about, you know, the messages in the journey, and the wisdom in the madness, you know, and kind of turning really the old paradigm on it, the medical model, on its head, and looking at the science and personal stories of people that have recovered from so-called schizophrenia or psychotic breaks, and kind of, you know, documenting why things need to change, why the paradigm shift needs to happen. And we were saying before, it's like, I think your book was published in 2012, and you were talking about
That's
the
right,
need to be a paradigm shift then, and we're still talking about it now. So I think it feels like you're kind of, adding to that critical mass, and it's building, and we're kind of reaching a tipping point now where it's finally being acknowledged. So I think your work was a huge addition to that. Do you mind just giving people a bit of an overview about that and what you've done since then? And I know if people are interested, they can download the first part of your book for free from your website, can't they? Rethinkingmagnus.com. So, which is a great book. So, highly recommend to do that.
Sure. Well, I think I'll just follow on what you said earlier about integrating these two aspects of our existence, really. I kind of refer to the words duality and unity. Essentially, the experience, we can think of, there's two sort of ways or aspects to our experience. One is I experience myself as separate from other. There's a sense of separateness. Or, a lot of traditions refer to that as duality, this versus that, or me versus you. There's a sense that I am separate from you, and I'm separate from that tree, and this kind of thing. And on one hand, it's actually a very valid experience, and it's an important experience to be able to navigate through the world and maintain the existence of this organism. I have to be able to make discernments between this and that, friend and enemy, food and poison, boundaries between me and you, etc. So this is actually, it is a valid experience. And that's only one aspect of truth. As we kind of dive a little deeper, whether we use more spiritual exploration or whether we look at modern physics or whatever modality we look at, when we go into deeper fabric of existence, we actually find that that's actually an illusion. Fundamentally, everything is profoundly interconnected, profoundly, not unlike the ocean. And so each living being is like a wave marching across the ocean. On one hand, the waves look separate, but on the other hand, they're actually all just manifestations of the same sea. And there's a continuous dance or interplay between manifestations arising, kind of experiencing a sense of selfhood, and then essentially dissolving, or however you might disintegrating back into the sea. So you could kind of look at a deeper fabric of existence, this profound interconnectedness and impermanence. And so people who, so there's a couple things that happen. First of all, once we're born, there's this whole process of development, human development, where we develop a sense of self. We initially kind of get born into a rock. It's hard to ask an infant what they're experiencing, but we can assume there's a rock, quite a unit of experience. The boundaries between self and other are quite blurred, starting with who's mom versus me, and then slowly individuating so there's a sense of self, me versus mom, and me versus the world. And so that's considered healthy development. And early trauma can actually interfere with that. So actually a person can kind of end up with some blurred boundaries between self and other in different ways. And on one hand, that's very problematic because it's hard to meet your needs and have healthy relations when there's kind of these blurred boundaries. But on the other hand, it does open that person up. This is where I think sort of the flip side of trauma, the wisdom side of trauma, it opens a person up to actually having deeper experiences of the world because they haven't sort of formulated clear, rigid, structured sense of self in some ways. As problematic as that might be, they're also open to having more transpersonal type experiences.
Yeah.
And so this is where the integration sort of needs to happen. If someone gets caught in one extreme or the other, either with profoundly rigid sense of self and other, that's often a very isolated, despairing place to live. Or if they're caught in a very blurred boundaries between self and other, that can be a very confusing place to live as well. And so people with trauma often, they might fluctuate from one extreme to the other, or they're not those aren't integrated. The experience of duality and unity aren't properly integrated. And like in my own experience, my terror was I actually felt on a deep fabric of my being that experience of both of trying to pick one or the other. It's like I really long for that love and connection, belonging, of experiencing myself as being part of something larger. I mean, it's a deep thirst for that. But on the other hand, I was terrified of losing myself. So it seemed like this impossible dilemma. Well, how do I have both? How can I have both an experience of deeper interconnectedness, but without losing myself, feeling like I'm just disintegrating? And so I was kind of fluctuating between these states, and it was really terrifying. And in the end, by following the process, the wisdom was in here, and I had to just sort of trust it. Shifting out of a dichotomy from either or to what we might call a dialectic, a paradox of both and. They're both valid, and I can actually honor both perspectives, and see the truth in each one, see the validity of each one, that they actually important, and actually experience and trust that my being actually knows how to integrate those. If I can sort of step out of the way a little bit, just maintain a presence and this kind of mindful stance towards my experience, that will happen. And so it's really fascinating. It's a fascinating journey to feel that. It's hard to put into words exactly how you do it. It's sort of, you have to, in a way, you trust the deep wisdom of the being, and you just simply resource and support and establish healthy relationships, and establish a healthy relationship with yourself as well as other human beings and other nature and the world at large. And you trust that integration occurs. But when you take those away, when a person doesn't have healthy relationships with other people, they don't have a healthy relationship with themselves, and they don't have a healthy relationship with nature, then the integration, it's really hard for that to occur. And that's the problem with the current mental health care system. It essentially drugs people into oblivion, where your own resources get really diminished. I mean, yes, you might have some symptom relief from that initially, but your own resources and capacity get diminished. People generally are not really supported in developing healthy relationships with others. They often just isolate even further. And then so they end up kind of caught in this chronic, kind of caught in the middle, where they can't really go through the other side and feel that integration. And so you get so many people caught in chronic mental illnesses, and that's where they are. They're right in the middle. The mental health care system is trying to hold them back. And hey, don't go any further, because that's really bad. There's madness out there. And the organism, this person's trying to go forward, say, no, we actually have to keep going. We're only halfway through the tunnel. And so the poor person just caught in the middle. And so my approach is like, okay, how do we actually help this person, support them to feel resourced enough to go ahead and continue following that deeper wisdom of their being, to trust that they can actually come through the other side and a much healthier, happy, more holistic, integrated place.
Yes. Wow, amazing. That I love the analogy of the ocean. You just shared such nuggets of wisdom there, Paris. It's like, oh my gosh, I need to go back to so many of the things you've said. But yeah, so that the kind of the waking up to the paradox of everything, and needing to realize that it's both and there isn't any definitive reality, and yet we are separate, and we have to operate in this kind of consensus reality. It's a minefield, isn't it, really? I loved when you described, almost kind of that flipping on its head, like the trauma is a blessing. So when you have some, initial childhood trauma that opens you up or precipitates that kind of opening up to realizing that we are all connected, can be a blessing in itself. But if like you say, somebody's not supported to find their sense of self and develop that sense of self, separate self, then it can be really, really destructive and actually continue the crisis and make it. But the current mental health system just kind of reduces self-confidence and compassion, and has the complete opposite effect of what we know is needed, isn't it? So yeah,
it's kind of just, unfortunately we live in a contemporary society has very much, I think, lost our way when it comes to spiritual intelligence, transpersonal intelligence. Generally indigenous cultures have had, our roots as indigenous societies, we really had that. We had a general sense of, hey, we are part of something larger. We're part of this world, this universe, and somehow we've generally lost that. Now we become the conquerors, the masters of the universe, rather than simply just one more manifestation of it. So then you end up in this kind of sad situation where it's often the people, like you say, it's often the people who've experienced trauma just because of the pain of that, and the fact that their development has been a bit skewed and their boundaries have been a bit blurred, etc., are often the ones more likely to go on and develop these spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
Whereas if we maybe lived in a more wholesome society, we could actually, we already start with a more natural integration. We start with developing that healthy relationship and boundaries with self and other, but being brought up in a society that also has this broader perspective of the world. And so because our society has become so fragmented, an interesting irony is the people who've often been wounded the most are the ones who are most likely to open up to these more transpersonal and spiritual experiences. It's quite interesting.
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it? It's really amazing. One thing I wanted to ask you actually was your kind of expertise in your clinical practice, so how you work with people. I was speaking to a clinical psychologist in Romania the other day, and she was asking, she was saying, I'm really open to this, but I'm not sure how to progress and how to help people when they're going through the spiritual emergence process on my own, like on a one-to-one basis. What else can I do? So just wondering if you could share a bit more about how you work with people on and also I'm wondering if you find a pattern. Do you tend to have people who are going through this process come to you? Do you tend to kind of magnetize those types of people to you just naturally, or do you have any patterns with people you see? Sorry, I've asked you lots of questions in one go there.
Yeah. That's fine. Because they're connected. Well, first of all, it does kind of take a village. It's hard. I've actually had to back off of the more, working with people who are more acute, extreme places, diagnosed with acute psychosis, because I don't have trying to support someone like that just on a one-to-one basis, it's just too hard. Yeah, you really need like a community to hold that, and that's why I think the places like these Soteria homes and stuff are so wonderful. It sounds like you're familiar with them. Where you actually have a little community that can hold that. I think that's really important. It's just too hard for just one. Obviously, you can certainly help, but you also have to acknowledge your own limitations around that. I'm currently exploring the possibility of working with others to maybe establish some kind of refuge, sanctuary. This is kind of what you need when someone's in an acute place. Like with me, I was really fortunate. I was living in a community. They actually didn't really know what was going on, but it was still like, it was out in nature and I had a lot of freedom, and I could just really kind of I could just get my needs met in the way that I needed to. I just was quite fortunate in that, the way that I happened to live at the time. So yeah, one-on-one basis, it's hard. And the way that I deal with that is I immediately, it's all about resourcing. Okay, let's look at what we have to do to help you. We're gonna have to work together here. I can't, essentially I'm just a guide. You actually have to do the hard work yourself. So let's look at relationships. How do we help you either heal or distance from unhealthy relationships, and B, establish healthy ones? So that's very important that people have healthy relationships somehow established or getting established. So I look at that immediately. I look at what tools do you have to manage your emotions and overwhelming sensations and emotions, etc. So really make sure that they develop those tools on how to do that, how to ground themselves, center themselves, manage these powerful waves of emotions and stuff. Start to build that witness. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my, there's thoughts and beliefs and mind states moving through, but they're just passing storms, and developing kind of a sense of a broader, sort of sky-like awareness of the whole passing show without just getting sucked away by any one thing. So really help the person develop that attitude towards their experience. They can start to just ride this stuff out. So I always start with resourcing. Just have to start there. Help them get grounded, even applying the brakes a little bit, however that might be, avoiding things that are too triggering for a little while so they can get a little stability in their life. So yeah, you just have to start there basically, and then educate them about the bigger picture. So look, you've gone far enough down this path where there's no going back. You have to keep going forward, but there is a gas and a brake here. You can actually learn how to manage the speed of that a little bit to help them gain some kind of mastery of that. So that's basically what I end up doing, is helping them create that kind of community of themselves as much as possible, because I don't have the means to create that for them.
That's really helpful though, and really important. And I think that's where the open dialogue, the new open dialogue service comes in and creates a great kind of holding space for people. I was just recalling that you mentioned that you've got a support guide on your website. So if people want to find out more details about that, what kind of help process, then they can access that on your website.
Yeah, rethinkingmagnus.com, and actually I'm giving away the whole book for free now on the website, PDF version. Just wanting to get it out, the information out there, and then also on my articles page, you'll see. Well, there's Working with the Family, Madness in the Family guidebook, which is good for some family members, or either as someone going through extreme states, how do you manage with your family, or if you're a family member or loved one of someone, how do you support them? So there's a guidebook on that. And that's free. They're all these resources are free. And the other one is a spiritual emergency one that it weaves my own experiences into just some basic kind of outline for ways that I found helpful for supporting people, and kind of a framework that I think is quite universal. So regardless of what particular spiritual tradition, I tend to draw from the Buddhist and non-dual traditions because that's just the one that that helped me. But I'm completely understanding there's different frameworks that they still have these basic universal characteristics that you can still follow that seem to work well for people.
Yeah,
so that's all there.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned that, because it's really important, isn't it, that we're coming. It seems to be we're coming back, like you said, to bringing in like the tribal traditions again, and community, and kind of working ancestrally and with communities, rather than we're kind of coming from, I suppose, bringing the East and West together and kind of coming back into heart space from, we've kind of lived dominantly in head, haven't we, in the West, and it feels like we're kind of coming back together now. And that's kind of what I'm trying to really bring to the Emerging Proud event on the 12th of May is, using your thank you for agreeing to let us use your title for our open space discussion. That's brilliant. And it's about really trying to bring communities together at a grassroots level and catalyse this kind of, wisdom that the experiences hold, that kind of the people that have really been through the process have got the wisdom. Like you said, it's the people that have been through the trauma and opened up that really kind of carry the momentum to move this movement forward. So I wanted to create something that's international, that brings everybody together to kind of really try and mobilize some change at a grassroots level. So, and it's bringing in all of your information from your book from 5 years ago, trying to kind of bring all of that and other amazing people that have written about this work, and really kind of use that as a grounding to say, let's explore the wisdom in madness and kind of look at it from transforming stigma to transformation and what that actually means. So, I mean, you're a perfect example of someone who's lived the hero's journey,
right?
To show the people that it's possible. Really appreciate you sharing so personally. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, not only is it possible, it's the most likely outcome with the right support. We developed such a pessimistic attitude towards extreme states in our culture, but I think it's mostly because of the way we treat people going through those extreme states. If we really offer proper support, the wisdom's there.
Yes.
The being is already moving in the right direction. Let's just help facilitate that.
Yes. Thank you for picking me up on that. That's very true. Very true. I was going to ask you about the bigger picture. Do you see this as kind of like a bigger transformation in humanity as a whole? This is where we're kind of moving to. Do you have a vision of that?
I thought a lot about that. Actually, I have an article on my website called, what is it called? Can Madness Save the World? But anyway, it was intentionally a provocative title.
Yeah.
But the idea, it's kind of like, so I've gotten really into the idea of looking into chaos and complexity theories lately, which essentially say that evolution requires it's a series of chaos and order. And so in order for, when a current order or system is no longer working, it doesn't just simply do a nice clean transition to an adaptation to better order. It generally has to go through a process of kind of disintegration or chaos, falling apart, before it can reemerge into a more adaptive order. And so it's kind of this series of chaos followed by a more adaptive order, et cetera. And so I was looking at the state of the human species today, and there's no doubt we're in a state of extreme chaos at the moment. And so And if you look at madness like that as well, so when a person goes through a state of so-called madness or spiritual emergency, what's the whole worldview essentially kind of disintegrates, but then reintegrates in a more wholesome state. Or you can look at it in nature, the idea of caterpillar, first disintegrating into kind of a chrysalis, and then reintegrating this metamorphosis into a butterfly, a much more adaptive form than that caterpillar was, etc. So there's all kinds of metaphors for it. But the human species, looking at it optimistically, I'd like to say, okay, maybe we're in this chaotic place, and we're kind of disintegrating into a chrysalis, and we will reintegrate as a butterfly and be able to actually learn how to live more harmoniously with each other and the rest of the world, and can move back into a more expanded experience of selfhood. Because I was kind of making the point, I think we developed the disorder of constricted selfhood. We become just so, generally speaking, so isolated from nature and the universe and others, and this intense, rigid experience of self ends up leading to so much fear and hatred and all this stuff. And so the optimism is that we can move through this chaos, can actually be a kind of a madness or metamorphic process that can reemerge into something much more wholesome. Whether we're going to get there, I don't know. But it's nice to try to think about that. And then I offer the same suggestions. Well, if you look at how do you support someone going through madness or spiritual emergency, can we apply that to ourselves as an entire species? So what do you do? Essentially, you look at the modalities that work. So Terria homes, essentially, you maximize freedom. You still ensure a certain amount of safety and security, but while maximizing freedom. So you find that balance, which essentially is what's required, in a healthy, functioning sort of democratic system. Which, by the way, came from Native Americans. A lot of people don't realize that the democracy of the U.S. actually came from the Native Americans, which were helping founders of the Constitution at the time. But another story. So in a democracy where all the voices are present, essentially you also do this in the open dialogue approach where everybody has a voice at the table. It's not just the humans, but other species and Mother Nature. We all have a voice at the table, and the truth and the wisdom comes from actually making space for all these voices to actually be heard, and not validating any one of them.
Yeah.
So these are kind of the approaches that are important that we've kind of forgotten about. If you're interested, you can find the article on the website.
Beautiful. Absolutely. I love that chaos theory, because it's like you just described pretty much exactly what's happening at the moment, haven't you? I mean, we can see it playing out, and it makes it easier to cope with if you can hold that dual aspect of actually it's horrendous and it's chaos and it's awful, but it's also necessary for our evolution. It's kind of an easier way to handle sitting with the horrendous situation that's happening at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
The old order. The old order is just clearly not working, and so something new has to emerge, and it's probably going to be a bit painful getting there.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. And all of the voices are speaking out now, which is beautiful. It's kind of the outcome that we need. So yes. Yeah. Thank you. Just to end on, I wondered if you would, if you have kind of an ideal vision of what services would look like in the future for somebody who's going through the spiritual emergence process to kind of go to residential, or what that might look like to you. Do you have a kind of a vision of an ideal service or system?
I think the models are already actually there, really. So the kind of the two models that are probably the most well known, at least in the field, kind of the alternative to psychosis sort of field, are soteria homes, or essentially residential homes, where which are great if someone's going through an acute place and there's no possibility of really in that moment of creating a family environment that really is suitable for them. Then there's kind of a sanctuary home where the person can be really supported to go through the process. And it's peer run. So really nice things about soteria homes, they're peer run. So they're run by others who've had similar experiences, not run by mental health professionals who haven't had the experience and are really just in it for the dollar. Yeah. So these are actually, it's about being supported by others who really have the heart. They've been there, they have the heart space, they've lost their mind and found the heart.
Oh, I love that.
And so I think that's what it's really important to have that kind of holding container. So the Soteria home I thought was a really excellent model for that. And then the other piece is the open dialogue, which a lot of people are familiar with. Comes from Finland, and it's an approach of supporting the whole family. So it's saying, okay, when someone's experiencing extreme states, they're not just an isolated island themselves. They're part of a broader system. And, kind of like a canary in a coal mine. The canary gets sick first, but it's actually an indicator of something, a bigger problem going on. So in open dialogue, they support the whole social system. And they don't just identify, they don't IP, they don't basically say, look, okay, this person's the problem person.
Yeah.
They go, okay, this person's just a canary. Well, let's actually support this whole system. There's something going wrong in this whole system here. And so they support the whole family to create a nice holding container for that individual, as well as try to work through whatever it was that was so problematic for that person in the first place that led them into such a chaotic path. So I think those two models working together are really important. And then the third one, because of all the rampant use of drugs, psychiatric drugs, I guess all drugs really, illicit drugs, et cetera, but because it becomes so rampant as a way for people to manage their experience. In the short term, they can provide symptom relief, but in the long term, they just provide more problems. Now you have substance dependency on top of everything else. And that adds a whole nother kind of wrench to the works. So it's important that there's also really acknowledgement of supporting people and how to taper. Well, first of all, the health system learning about the idea of only using these drugs are very powerful, just using them very minimally and for the least period of time for people. And then when people have been using them, that has to be taken into consideration for this person's healing process. You can't, at some point, that cast, so to speak, has to be taken off so the person gets strong again. The drugs represent a cast, and maybe they help in the short term, but you can't, if you just leave the cast on, they're never going to get strong again. So you have to support them in slowly coming off and transitioning the resource to the healthier. So kind of all three of those pieces seem important to me. Sanctuary homes for those who need them. I should put it in the order of open dialogue kind of approach. If you can support the family first, I think that's the best way to go. But if for some reason you can't do that, it's too dysfunctional or whatever's going on, then the sanctuary homes are next best. And then that can look in different ways, but essentially the spirit of heart, the spirit of maximal freedom, making sure there's safety, but obviously maximal freedom for the individuals to go through whatever the process needs to occur. And then the third one is just we have to acknowledge that there's a big drug problem, and that also has to be kind of brought into the loop as well, how to support people around that.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's like you said, the kind of the models and the new systems are already there, aren't they? They're already emerging, and it's lovely that it seems to be bridging as well with the mainstream services, because it doesn't work to fight the system. We've got to kind of try and work with it and evolve it rather than kind of trying to just negate it completely. Right. It's there, so we need to make.
I think you can make little pockets outside of it, initially, but ultimately it has to be integrated.
Thank you for that. It's really hopeful, isn't it? Because it's kind of it's already happening. It's already out there and spreading. So, like you said, it's raising awareness and also bringing peers in more. It's where the heart is. I love that. Yeah. Finding the heart through losing the head. I love that.
I actually got that. Who was it? Dan Millman, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I don't know if you ever read that book.
I have.
That was quite good for me. In my own journey, I actually, that book I found helpful. And he talked about, I lost my mind and found the heart. And I thought, wow, I really like that.
Gosh, I so relate to that. Yeah, lovely. Beautiful. Thank you, Paris. Really, really appreciate you being with us. So you are at rethinkingmagnus.com, and you have a private practice in New Zealand. Whereabouts are you? If people wanted to contact you.
Tauranga.
Okay.
So it's in the North Island, about 2 hours south of Auckland. It's a town called Tauranga, Tauranga. And just I'm mostly specializing in trauma. Working with people in trauma at the moment, for all kinds of different traumas, but and it ends up, even if people again don't necessarily have a transpersonal context to begin with, it just emerges in the process, as they go through the healing process. And it's really, yeah, it's lovely work to just support people and expanding, coming out of the shell and turning
Yeah,
from a limited caterpillar to a lovely free butterfly.
beautiful. I wondered if you saw that more because you're obviously, I suppose, because you're the safe space to allow that to emerge because you've been through it yourself. Wondered if that you see that more with your clients. So yeah, you've just
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of initially thought I was specializing in psychosis, extreme states and stuff, but then I really, this is where I kind of expanded to basically trauma in general. Because again, it's, well, first of all, just living in contemporary society and has a kind of trauma, even if we're sheltered from the big trauma, it's just, there's such an isolationism that goes with it. It's quite hard for all of us, I think. But generally just looking at it from that perspective, it's like, all organisms have a wisdom, and when they get hurt, that we shift into this kind of a survival stance. We shift into desperate strategies to try to survive and thrive, etc. And then the strategies show up in all these different ways that we call mental illnesses or psychosis. And, if they're really particularly extreme, we call them psychosis or spiritual emergency. But essentially it comes down to trauma, really. I think, the organism has gotten battered a bit. Needs support working through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just recalling something you said actually in relation to what you just said there about what's happening, the trauma that's happening in the world now, and you can't avoid that. Everybody's experiencing some level of trauma. So those people that you said before who hadn't necessarily had trauma in childhood to break the ego shell, they had a very strong sense of self. I suppose they're experiencing the kind of the cracking of that now through the trauma that's happening within the world. So that's
kind of
exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about contemporary society is there's very few people I think who actually raised. Again, if you look at more how an indigenous society functions, where there's a more communal experience. You're raised generally experiencing a broader your sense of self, even though you're developing a self versus other experience. You generally feel much more connected with the community. You feel more connected with nature. So there's a broader experience, more expanded experience of self. So that's just kind of more naturally how you would be raised. And the way we're experiencing now, even if you don't have overt trauma as a child, we're still generally being raised in a very isolated way. These little kind of isolated little families that are often not very well connected to the external community. Very rarely connected to the natural world around us, to our environment. The natural world is huge. I mean, I see that personally as a huge form of trauma, and it's that we've gotten decoupled from our birth, our true mother, the Earth.
Our Mother Earth, yeah.
We've lost contact with Mother Earth, generally speaking, and I think that's very traumatic. It's not unlike being pulled away from your birth, your human mother as a child.
Yeah.
So I think generally as a species, I think we're all going through it's just normalized now, so it doesn't seem like trauma.
Yeah.
But essentially, it results in these problematic development of the self, where we end up with a very non-adaptive experience. Not able to integrate the experience, a healthy experience of self versus other, and this more broader, expanded experience of the self. We've kind of lost that. Now we're all trying to find our way.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant point. That's so true. We've got a lot to learn from the indigenous cultures, that's for sure, haven't we?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Paris, and being here and emerging proud again.
Yeah. My pleasure, Katie. Thanks so much for having me.
Really lovely to meet you. Thank you so much, Paris.
You too.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.